April 18th, 2011. A man named Geoffrey Mutai crosses the finish line of the Boston Marathon and breaks what is, at that exact moment in history, the fastest time any human being has ever run a marathon. 2 hours, 3 minutes, 2 seconds. The crowd loses its mind. The entire running world stops and stares at the clock. And then, within hours, World Athletics says no. It does not count. Not a world record. Not even close to official. Just a very fast run on a very strange course. So here's the question I want you sitting with for the next 9 minutes. If Boston goes downhill, why do the best runners on the planet say it is actually the hardest race they have ever run? The answer involves a hill, a shoulder tap, and a physiological trap built into this course for over 100 years. Boston is the oldest annual marathon in the world. It has been run every single year since 1897, and yet none of the fastest times ever run there count as official world records. Not Mutai's 2:03, not Ryan Hall's 2 hours and 4 minutes and 58 seconds, the fastest marathon ever run by an American at the time. Not any of them. World Athletics rules say a marathon course cannot drop more than 1 meter of elevation per kilometer from start to finish. Boston drops about 3.3 meters per kilometer. The start sits at roughly 150 meters above sea level. The finish is at about 5. The course loses nearly 140 meters of altitude over 42 kilometers. And on top of that, the start and the finish are so far apart in a straight line that a strong tailwind can push runners the entire way. On that day in 2011, the wind was estimated at 15 to 20 miles per hour directly at the runners' backs. Mutai himself said he never noticed anything about wind. He called it a gift from God. World Athletics was not impressed. But here is the twist, and this is what makes Boston genuinely fascinating. The course that gives you free speed in the first half is also the course that quietly builds the trap that will destroy you later. When you run downhill, your quadriceps do something called eccentric contraction. Instead of shortening to produce force the way a muscle normally works, they are being forced to lengthen under load. They are acting like a brake, absorbing your body weight against gravity with every single step. And that kind of braking work breaks the muscle at a microscopic level in a way you simply cannot feel while it is happening. Think of it like this. Each step on that downhill is a tiny controlled tear in the muscle fibers. Individually, they mean nothing. But over 10 kilometers, they stack up. Research shows the forces on the quadriceps during downhill running can be 20 to 30% higher than on flat terrain at the same speed. And here is the cruelest part. Your heart rate stays low. Your breathing is relaxed. You feel great. You probably go a little faster than planned. The whole time your quads are loading damage they will cash in later at a very specific hill, at a very specific kilometer. Before we get to that hill, I want to tell you how it got its name. Because it did not start as a symbol of athletic suffering. It started with one man humiliating another. The year is 1936. John Kelly is the defending Boston champion. He is a Massachusetts native, the local hero, and as the race climbs into the Newton Hills, he catches up to a Narragansett runner named Ellison Brown. Brown's nickname is Tarzan, and as Kelly passes him on that climb, he does something that will haunt him for the rest of his life. He gives Tarzan Brown a friendly pat on the back. Kelly later admitted it was, and I am quoting him directly, a little cocky. Tarzan Brown did not take it well. He surged, dropped Kelly on that hill so decisively that Kelly never closed the gap again, and went on to win the race. A Boston Globe reporter named Jerry Nason was watching, and he wrote that Brown had broken Kelly's heart on that hill. The name stuck, Heartbreak Hill. Named not for the general suffering of runners, but for the very specific, very personal anguish of a man who celebrated one step too soon. Kelly went on to run Boston 61 times. He won twice. He later joked that his heart had been broken 7 times on that hill. In 1993, a bronze statue was placed near the climb. It shows a younger Kelly holding hands with his older self. It is called Young at Heart, and it faces the runners as they approach. Now here is why that 3.4% gradient at kilometer 32 destroys people who felt perfectly fine at kilometer 20. And stay with me here, because in the next few minutes, I am going to tell you about a man whose doctor told him not to walk upstairs, and about a woman who changed the sport forever. And both stories connect directly to what happens to your body right here, right now, on this hill. Your muscles store energy as glycogen, and at marathon pace, you burn through roughly 3 to 4 grams of it per minute. A well-trained athlete has enough for about 30 to 35 kilometers if they start with full stores. But in Boston, that clock runs faster than you realize. The eccentric damage from the early downhills forces your fibers to work less efficiently, burning more fuel for the same output. And the pull of the downhill quietly pushes your pace above plan without you noticing. Then your brain intervenes in a way most people do not expect. A researcher named Tim Noakes proposed what is called the central governor model. The idea is that your brain does not wait for your muscles to actually run out of fuel before it acts. It monitors everything continuously, and when the numbers start looking dangerous, it reduces the signals it sends to your muscles. It turns the engine down. You experience this as your legs suddenly feeling like concrete. You tell them to move faster. They refuse. That is not weakness. That is your own brain making a decision to protect you from yourself. And in Boston, that moment tends to arrive at the bottom of Heartbreak Hill. The history of Boston is full of people who learned this the hard way, and some of their stories are remarkable. Clarence DeMar won Boston 7 times between 1911 and 1930. He worked long hours in a print shop and often ran to and from work as his training. Early in his career, a doctor told him he had a bad heart and should not even walk upstairs. Race officials warned him he was risking his life. He ignored them. He competed in multiple Olympics. He kept setting records into his 40s. When he died of cancer at age 70, Boston cardiologists examined his heart and published the results in the New England Journal of Medicine. His coronary arteries were 2 to 3 times the normal diameter. The men who told him not to walk upstairs had been examining perhaps the most powerful cardiovascular engine of his generation. Then there is Catherine Switzer. In 1967, she was a 20-year-old journalism student who registered for Boston using only her initials to avoid being rejected as a woman. A few miles into the race, co-race director Jock Semple jumped off a press truck, grabbed her by the shoulder, and shouted at her to get out of his race. Her boyfriend tackled Semple off the course. She kept running. She finished in 4 hours and 20 minutes. The photographs went worldwide. The medical argument used to ban women from marathons at the time was that the distance could damage their reproductive organs, or that they might grow beards, or suffer psychological collapse. Women were officially allowed to run Boston in 1972. What Switzer proved was the same thing DeMar proved decades earlier. The limits people said were biological were actually just assumptions nobody had bothered to test. And that lesson, that the body adapts when you prepare it properly, is exactly what modern elite runners take to heart when they approach this course. Today, the best runners in the world do not pretend Boston is like any other race. The most important adaptation they train for is not speed. It is making the quadriceps resistant to downhill damage before race day. Sharon Lokiti's coach specifically described the goal as getting her legs calloused for the downhills, because if you beat them up at mile 16 without preparation, you are going to have a long way to the finish. The pacing strategy is completely different too. On a flat course like Berlin or Chicago, elite runners aim for a slight negative split, running the second half a little faster than the first. In Boston, the goal is nearly the opposite. Start conservatively despite the downhill pulling you forward. Protect the quads through the first 15 kilometers, and try to arrive at Heartbreak with enough left in the tank to actually run up it. Studies of Boston race data confirm this. Runners who start significantly faster than their overall pace suffer massive slowdowns after kilometer 33. Runners who hold back early tend to hold together late. So here is the answer to the question we started with. Mutai ran faster than any human in history, and World Athletics said no. Not because he was wrong, but because the rules exist to measure what the human body can do, not what the wind and the topography can do together. Boston tests something different. It tests whether you understand your own body well enough not to spend energy you are going to need later. It tests whether you can hold yourself back when the course is offering you free pace. Heartbreak Hill is 3.4% for 600 meters. On a fresh day, you would barely notice it. But after 32 kilometers of invisible damage and silent fuel burn, that gentle grade is the most honest thing in endurance sports. It does not lie. It does not give you second chances. It simply shows you who prepared and who just ran fast in the first half and hoped for the best. John Kelly learned that from a shoulder tap in 1936. Runners have been learning it every April since. I am Sebastian from the Injury Breakdown. If this video got you thinking about the absolute edge of what the human body can do, the next one is going to take you even further. It is called The Three Men Standing Between Humanity and the Last Barrier in Sport, and it covers what the science actually says about whether any human being will ever officially run a marathon in under 2 hours. The link is on screen right now. See you there.